Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cynthia Linox Show. I am your host, Cynthia Linox. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we're going to bring some clarity to those of you that have had questions about my coaching discipline and so forth. Now, you know that this show is aired once a week, every Thursday, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, and it is streamed on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Now, if you can't join me at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, you can pick up the show 24/7 on the same platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And again, that's 24/7. Now, and of course, it is the Cynthia Linox Show. Besides the show, I am also a life coach, and I have shared that I am a transformational identity architect. And some of you have asked, what is a transformational identity architect? Well, in life coach, there's so many disciplines. You've got your leadership life coach, you have your nutritional life coach, fitness life coach, parenting life coach, how to live life coach, and a whole bunch of different disciplines. You can always find someone that is willing to guide you and walk alongside with you so that you can become the best in whatever area that you need, want, desire, dream, has a goal for. Mine, as a transformational identity architect, I deal with or I focus on the identity level as opposed to the behavioral level. As a whole, we have an identity and we have characteristics and attributes that are uniquely us, and personalities and so forth. And so you have people that deal with the behavioral aspect. Well, I'm not a motivational type coach, and I'm not a fixer. I'm not a healer. I'm not a fixer. You're not broken. So I don't focus on that at all. I focus on the identity. Now, behavioral has to do with your upgrading your performance, setting goals. It has to do with mindset shift and changing habits and so forth. That's behavioral. As an identity coach, as an identity architect, my focus is on who do you believe that you are? Taking you back to that place before you were ever conditioned, before conditioning took place, and programming and indoctrination. What are the things that you allow in your life? What are the things that you tolerate in your life? And what do you unconsciously identify with? We all identify with something. And in most cases, it has to do with a belief system, because beliefs are inherited. Beliefs are not chosen. You didn't choose the belief that you have. It's inherited. Because once you know who you are, authorship begins to take place. What is authorship? Authorship is when you come to find out that everything in life, everything, absolutely everything is made up. Somebody made it up. That is hard to grasp, because when we have belief system, inherited belief system, it gets into our nervous system. And what happens is that it shows itself as truth. And for some, if they're not mature enough or not honest with themselves, it's hard to break away from a belief from the truth. For some people, it's hard to even say, I don't know. certain things that, when in my research about when I was going through my journey of self-discovery and so forth, certain things I simply don't know. But then again, it is okay with me not to know. Some people, they prefer to have an assumption and make it a truth, an assumptive truth, and live by that, guide their lives, their entire lives by that. I was not willing to do that. So it has freed me up to really come into that place where I can walk in the essence of who I am. And what that is to recognize the things that are innately me, and the things that are my birthright, so that I can avoid you have to work hard, you have to save, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to comply, you have to obey, you have to, all of that. You have to struggle, you have to grind, you have to hustle, you have to, you have to just do and force and make it happen. And then, you come up with depression and anxiety and stress of all kinds. I went through that years ago, just by default, not knowing. And after I took a pause and start really checking myself out, checking my whole uh, consciousness, I became aware. I became awoke, awoken, awake, alert as to who I am. The best journey you can put yourself through, my friend, is a journey of self-discovery. And for the last couple of years, on this show, that's what we talked about. A journey of self-discovery, going back to the place to discover who you are, who is your real self, who you are before conditioning happened. Because, by the time you're 5 years old, you are well conditioned. You are conditioned socially, culturally, religiously. You are conditioned politically. You are conditioned in so many ways. And you grow up misidentified, because all of the programming shape and form your identity. And, when I talk about identity, it's not something like, well, I know who I am. And, when you have situations like loneliness or depression, anxiety, not knowing who you are, you're being afraid, your incessant desire to please, you become a people pleaser, you're afraid to say no, you're afraid to stand up for yourself, you are afraid to just show up as who you are. So you live a life of pretend, of make believe, of I want them to like me. You seek validation, approval, affirmation, and all of that. But once you know who you are, you show up in the fullness of the essence of your being, with your attributes and unique characteristics and qualities that define you. Many years ago, I know that when I was, I used to live in New York at one time, and life was good. I've always had this thought that, I, I, I deserve, I'm entitled to, I am privileged. That just always sits with me, because I'm not gonna, I never badmouth myself, or I never think bad about myself or try to put myself down at all. So I had a really good life in New York City, good job and stuff like that. And there was a time where I had like a really down time, and had to do with relational stuff, relationship. Not with my husband now. I was married before, and I was dealing with some situations, and I was at a very vulnerable moment. And then somebody came and they shared the gospel, salvation with me, and I knew nothing about that, because I grew up Catholic. Catholics, we're free. We're free in our minds, because we don't subscribe to the hellfire and brimstone doctrine. So we are, have a certain freedom in our minds to just live. But anyway, so somebody preached to me the gospel and so forth, and I got born again. And with that, I just, because I'm just passionate about a whole lot of stuff when I lock in. And so I wanted to really, because in New York it's a little different. New York is very fast paced, and you can't. It's hard to slow down. It's just fast paced. So I decided to move to California, and California is a totally different rhythm from New York. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was in California and, at work, and I used to be just hustling and just doing things fast and just looking at the clock and making sure things are done and accomplished. And people are like, well, whoa, 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 just slow down a little bit. It's like, what's the rush? What's the hurry? And it was really interesting because I really had to get that. I really had to fall into that that rhythm, that place of just chilling. Things is gonna get done. And surprisingly enough, these folks, I used to live in Newport Beach, California, over there by 101 Pacific Coast Highway. And people they just chilled. They did surfing, went to the beach, and just it was just they have a different mindset. And here I am coming from New York with this whole hustle culture that I had to adapt and so forth. So I got born again and took on this different lifestyle. I was told, and this was born again into Christianity. And with that doctrine, you are told what to think. And so I adapted that whole mindset, not how to think or how to process things, but what to think. And everything is guided by dogma. Everything is guided by a script. That's why when people or Christians, religious people today, when they do something or whatever, they'll say, well, what the scripture says, or that's not Christ-like, or what does the Bible say, or what does the word say, and things like that. So what happens is that your life become performative. You start performing. You live a performative life based on the script. And that's the difference. When I talked about getting to know who you are, you take on a mentality, you take on a signature of authorship. And authorship is writing your own script. When you sit and you think about how did things come to be, you realize that everything was made up. Everything has been made up. Everything is made up. Rules, laws, regulations, things to follow. Everything is made up. Everything is made up. Everything is made up. And once you get that, then you start questioning. Something as simple as, at work, if you're going to leave a job, they say that, you need to give 2 weeks notice. Who made that up? Somebody made that up. Somebody made up that rule. But if they're going to fire you, sometimes they just fire you on the spot. They don't tell you 2 weeks in advance. They just fire you on the spot. But, it's a rule that's been made up in corporate America, or, that's almost universal, at least here in the West. So everything is made up. Rules are made up. Things are made up in society. Look at like here in America, we have this time change. In the spring, we have it. I think it's spring ahead, and in the fall, it's fall behind. We turn the clock an hour behind, and in the spring, we kick it up an hour ahead. That is a rule. That is a system that was made up. And the same way we made that up, we can unmake it up. We can, things are made up by men. And once you get to know that, if you are really serious about authoring your life, if you're serious about coming to that place where you are writing your own script, you will start paying attention to that. I start paying attention to this whole, when I was in religion. I start getting a little restless because life was too confined, too stifling, too stringent. And because I am so curious, I subject myself to an open mind, to be curious about things, to search things out. And I am always digging on the inside. I come to a place of rest, but as I rest and I discover things about myself, I want to know who, when, why, how, where, all of that. So I spend time um, really focusing on self-care. And not just self-care by going to the spa, having my nails done. No. I'm talking about things like really uh, finding out, discovering who I am. Who is Cynthia? And it's not laborious. It's just because what I find is that the more I discover about me, the freer I get, the freer I become. Because then I come to the understanding, because a lot of when I was in religion, the whole Christian doctrine is fear based. There is no question about that. People are afraid of everything. They're afraid to offend a God. They're afraid they're going to go to hell or not make it to heaven. They're afraid of taking God's glory. That's why people don't any accolades. They don't own it. Their skills, expertise, talents, they don't own it at all, because everybody thinks, well, if it wasn't for God, they wouldn't do it. But my thinking is a little different now that I have come to know myself and know that everything was made up. Because you have to ask yourself the simple questions. It's like this whole thing with religion, and who made that up? Where did it come from? Who started it? What evidence do we have that any of these people existed? The disciples, names like, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's like, back in 500 BC, those names did not exist. But who came up with all of this? Who came up with the Jesus story? Have you asked yourself that way? And you know why it's important is because whatever you believe, it's inherited. And many of you walk through life not even knowing, not even asking. The other day I had a conversation with someone, and they were Seventh-day Adventists. And I was asking because I am familiar with the Seventh-day Adventist doctrine a little bit. I forgot about it, but at one point, I was familiar with that. When I was younger, when I was a kid, I went to boarding school, and the boarding school, that was the discipline of that place. It was a Seventh-day Adventist as far as religion, because there were no Catholic boarding school available to go to. So anyway, and I was asking the person, what, like, what, like, do you know anything about, like, where did this come from? What's a Seventh-day Adventist? And they had no idea. And I said, well, do you know who I think her name is Ellen G. White. Ellen G. White is a woman. And she, I think there was first something like Adventist or whatever, and they had certain doctrine, and she was not pleased with that. And she decided to break off and started the Seventh-day Adventist doctrine. And this person had no idea who Ellen G. White is. And I only remember because, I recently kind of look it up and remembered. But this person had no idea. Yet they follow the doctrine, and the whole doctrine shapes their lives. The whole doctrine, but they don't know anything of how it started. Why did it start? About the belief system. why they believe the way they believe, and why worship on a Sabbath instead of Sunday, and all of that. They had no idea. And that really happened to a lot of people, a lot of even people that are in the evangelical movement, in the Baptist, the Methodist, the Presbyterian, all this, the Anglican. They don't know. People don't know why they believe what they believe. And for some reason, people just conduct their lives that way. They just live that way. There was a situation with a couple. They were, of course, they're married. I don't know, 20, 25 years or something, like that. And they were having some problems in their marriage. And one of the spouse was fed up. They had it. They were about to just call it quits. And I guess they went into counseling and so forth. And I'm not one that believe in saving a marriage. That doesn't make a lick of sense to me, because if you want to save a marriage, that's for people to see. That's for people, just like a wedding. A wedding is not for you. A wedding is I guess for you to celebrate with people. You spend $40, $60, $100,000 on a wedding for people. But then, and then a marriage, to save a marriage for what? There are two entities, there are two individuals that come together, and you must be happy. You are a whole, and you are a whole, and you come together as a partner, as a team, and because you want to, not because you have to. So anyway, they were in counseling, and I guess they were told that the only reason that is allowed for divorce is if there is adultery while within the marriage. You know what I mean? If one of the parties commit adultery, that is the only reason why you should marry. And and I got to think about that. When they shared it, I said, so what if one person is abusive? What if one person is, whether it's mentally, emotionally, or physically, what if they're abusive? Are you going to tell me that because it is scripted, because the scripture says you cannot leave? And they got to thinking. So this is someone that was trying to find themselves, because they were so unhappy within that relationship. There was nothing there. It was gone. It was done. It was finished. No emotions, no nothing. And they had to come to a place to make a decision. Well, what is it? Okay, so you said your vows. Just listen to this. For better, for worse. What the hell is that? For better, for worse, or whether you treat me. If you become lazy and not responsible and not taking accountability or whatever, and it goes to worse, we keep the relationship, because the vows were for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, till death do us part. So is that death, physical death, or is it death of the emotions? You have to think it through. And so, this person got to where they started thinking critically and exercising their emotional intelligence in order to come up with a decision that would work for both parties, because that's the whole thing. It's not just you, it's for both parties. Now, one party may not be happy because of the decision that one makes, but that's just life. And you see, when you come into this place of knowing who you are and settling in your mind what you identify with, do you identify with truth, or do you identify with a scripted, performative, pretend lifestyle, following the script of someone else? Or are you ready to take on authorship of your life, writing your own script? Because remember, I said everything is made up. And that's why people go through life with lack, in poverty, sick, confused, unhappy. Why? They don't know who they are. They don't know who they are. If they're sick, they don't understand that their body can repair itself. If they have emotional issues, they don't understand what it takes, how to channel your mind. They don't understand who they are. So they go through life uh, looking for validation, affirmation, permission, approval, people pleasing so that they can be liked, afraid to say no, afraid to take risk, afraid to go outside of the bubble, because everything they do or say, and I'm talking about people that are involved in Christian doctrine, everything they do and say, if it doesn't line up with the script that someone else wrote, with the word that someone else wrote, with the Bible that someone else wrote. Someone is like Ellen G. White. She created her own religion. And hundreds, thousands of people follow that religion because of Ellen G. White. Really? And you know, when I was in that boarding school when I was younger, I was expelled 3 times. I was mischievous. 3 of us. We were the youngest. Myself and 2 other girls. And we used to do things, and you know, we were from different countries, but we were close friends, and we used to do a lot of mischiefs. And I was kind of like the ringleader. And they put me on a plane, send me home. I had to go face my dad. Oh gosh, you know, the first time that was something. So my dad, you know, he got on the phone with what's his name? He was like the director of administration and finance and all that. And anyway, they got me back into the school and whatever. A few months later, the same thing happened. You know, we got out of bounds, and they expelled me again. They expelled me and Ofma and Olga, all 3 of us. And my dad got me back in the school again. You know, he was able to. You know, my dad was very influential in that area and so forth, and got me back into the school. And Ofma came back, and Olga came back, and I was there trying to just comply and obey and so forth. And they were all laws, rules, regulations, and some of them didn't make sense to me. And even though I was young but in my mind, I just knew that something wasn't right. And of course, we went home for vacation, you know, around the Christmas time and so forth. And the next year, when I came back, they expelled me again. And this time they said, absolutely not. I don't care how much tuition you're going to pay. No, she's just not fit for here. But anyway, when they sent me back and they, you know, I went home and there with my, you know, my immediate family and so forth, because my older sister and I were at the boarding school. But when I got back, you know, my parents, they thought, you know, something wrong with me psychologically and so forth. So they took me to a psychologist and all that kind of stuff. And come to find out, they said, well, you know, there's nothing wrong with her. She was just homesick. She wanted her environment, and she, you know, anyway, I did not conform to the rules and the laws and all that kind of stuff, the regulations over there. So anyway, and I went to a local school in my community, became a student and leadership group and so forth. And it was just, I was a stellar student. The point is, when you come into that place of knowing who you are, when you come into that place of going back to your true self, your real self, your authentic self, before the indoctrination, the programming, the conditioning of your mind to comply, to obey, because that's how the system is set up. The system is set up for you to obey and for you to comply. The thing is, I'm not saying that's a good or bad, right or wrong. The point is, if you don't know what you are obeying or what you are subjecting yourself to comply, you will be out of alignment. And that's uh this whole system is designed to keep you aligned, to comply with their rules, the social culture, because social structure is created. It's a construct, social construct, cultural construct. That's why when you go to different places, you have to become familiar with the culture so that you can comply with that cultural identification, and you don't do something. I think there was some situation uh, in Asia, someplace, where someone wrote graffiti on the wall, and he was incarcerated and fined. He was incarcerated for a long time because that is a no-no in that part of the world. You don't take your habits over here someplace else where you don't know. Chewing and then spitting on the ground, that's in some places that is not permitted. So you need to know, it's important for you to know who you are so that for your life, you can author your own script. What does that mean? You can write your own script, but it takes a sense of maturity and responsibility. When I asked earlier, these people that are under this religious umbrella, why, do you know how it all started? Do you know it's like, and then one shared a plan of salvation. Is like, where did that come from? How did that get started? Who came up with that? Do we have any evidence of a savior? And these are hard questions. And then somebody would say to me, well, you're breathing. Who are making you breathe? And I said, well, I have lungs and there's oxygen and so forth. But there are certain things I do not know. And I am okay with not knowing. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not knowing. The things that I don't know, it's like somebody say, well, when you die, do you know where you're going? No. When I die, I'm dead. That's it. Neither you or me, none of us have proof of anything. Whether you believe it or not, that is totally irrelevant. Everything about heaven or hell and all that, it is all an assumption. It is all based on a belief system. It is all based on inherited belief. Everything that you follow that is scripted, somebody wrote it. And until you can reckon with that, until you can come to terms with that, that's not an easy place to be, because you have to give up things that are rooted into your nervous system. You have to really shuffle that. You have to excavate that. But it starts with being honest with yourself. If you're not honest with yourself, or if you resist, nothing is going to happen. And you have the right to resist. You have the right to, to go on with what you believe. You have the right, but all of that shapes who you believe you are. And if your life is not rightly aligned, if your life is not rightly aligned with the universe, with the things that you desire and so forth, and if you don't come to the understanding, because today we're no longer looking at influencers. We want to see receipts. And when you say things like when you say things like, God is good all the time, you need to have receipts. It's not, oh, he did this and they did that. No, you need to have receipts. When I want something, or when like, things are always happening in my life to assert, to show me that I'm on the right path, that I am aligned. Today, even my relationships, I don't go seeking out relationships. I don't, that's not, no, I appreciate people, and I appreciate, community and people and so forth. But for me, what's important is alignment. It is alignment. It's just a different level. It's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's just where I am. Because if I have to continually edit myself, or shrink, or edit, or explain, or whatever, I'm out of alignment. And because I am of that mindset, it's like things are simply unfolding. I'm getting calls and invitation to things that I thought, oh, I just wish I could, but then it's like, oh no. And then I get a call. It's like, let's go. And it's fascinating because, how can I say it? It's just a flow. It's like life begins to flow. There's no stress. I'm not worried. I am not anxious. I'm not trying to force my way into a situation. And if I know that I'm not comfortable in a certain place, or whatever, it just doesn't, nourish what I need, then it is okay. Again, it's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's simply you knowing who you are, and you're following that frequency, that energy, that vibe, to align yourself with the things that you desire, and it's, again, I call it, well, it's not just me, the soft life leading. The soft life is a thing. It's not me. I didn't come up with that. That's, somebody from, Nigerian, a Nigerian influencer came up with that whole thing. And it's a life of ease and comfort and, alignment and all of that. And as you relax and allow, whether it's wealth, abundance, prosperity, your health, to align with you, it's a whole different type of living. It is a whole different type of living, other than living. I know when I was a Christian, when I was a Christian, let me tell you, I used to teach in the Bible school. I used to teach intimacy with the Father, and I used to teach God wants you to prosper. That's at one big mega church here. And then later on, when I met my husband, he kind of came along with me, but that he never subscribed to this whole mindset of born again and all that, because he's from a different background and upbringing and so forth. And so we became leaders of King's Ministry, and that had to do with prosperity and abundance and so forth, and all of that. And it's interesting because I would because I subjected myself to the script, to the scriptures, to what was written. I followed that. I mean, I was like into it. I wasn't like what do they call it? Watered down Christian. No, I was into it. I preached and ministered and counsel people based on the word. I was a walking word person. And I remember, and we used to have like meetings at our house. our home, we would open it every Saturday, and people would come, and we would talk about the principles of prosperity and abundance and tithing and giving and all of that every week, every single Saturday. And I remember, even though I did that, came a point where I started asking questions. I started asking questions about the veracity of all of that, because the people weren't prospering as they should have been, and they were giving money. As a matter of fact, we used to take up an offering when we had the meetings at our home, and of course, that would go to the church. None of it came to us. All of it went to the church. The pastors. And I remember one time saying to the pastor's wife, I summoned her to coffee. I said, I have something I want to share with you, because I was reading where it says that one should give, because this whole idea of giving, I think it's Malachi 3:10. It says to give 10%, and God would open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing that you don't have room enough to contain, and so forth. But people were not, for me, I want to see receipts. People were still struggling for a long time. And so I started digging in the scriptures. And I found where it says that everyone should give with a happy heart, a joyful heart, and you give based on your determination. And there's no percentage. You give there's no such thing as tithing and so forth. So I summoned the pastor's wife and I said, you know what? I because I wanted to start teaching that, and I wanted to make sure that I was aligned with them, or seeking their approval or their validation that it's okay for me to share that, to teach that. And I remember she said to me, yeah, you can teach that as long, and they can give. She said they can give whatever they want to give, as long as they are giving 10%. So I was saying this whole tithe thing, I was almost invalidating this tithe concept. And she said, no. She said, as long as they're giving 10%, then they can give, whatever they want to give, in addition to the 10%. In other words, she didn't want to hear that God loves a cheerful giver, that you can give whatever you want to give, regardless, no percentage, whether you want to give 20%, 50%, 1%, not give a dime, whatever. She didn't want to have it. She didn't want to hear it. She said, as long as they're giving 10% of their gross earnings, then they can give whatever they want. She just missed the whole point. And with that, after a while, I just, after a while, my husband, one day he just said, you know what, I'm done with this, because he never bought into it. He never bought into this whole doctrine and so forth. So we decided to take a break, a sabbatical, and we left church. We left the church, well, to take a sabbatical. We just never went back. That was about, 17 years ago. And our lives, when we were at church, my husband, he just never tithed. He just never did that. He just said, my responsibility is my home. He just didn't buy into that. So he never, ever tithed 10%. He would give offerings, as he felt like it. And I would give offerings and first fruit to the pastors. I delighted in doing that. And as a matter of fact, we had situations in our marriage. If I wasn't, I remember one time I said to my, because we both were doing very well on our jobs, working and well paid and so forth. And I remember I used to send, because my husband does the finances and he does a fantastic job. And, we have like direct deposit. And I would say, here's the gross. And then I would just take out, I would say, and this is 10% of the gross. And he just did not buy into that. And we almost had situations, marital situations because of that, because I was so, and I was so doctrinally minded, but I had also seen people whose marriages got destroyed because of religion. I know someone that, gave their partner, a woman gave her husband an ultimatum. Either you get with the program, you get born again and start going to church, or we're done. And then, yeah, they split. And then there was another situation where the same thing happened. So I always kept that at the back of my mind, is like, wow, because it just didn't make any sense to me. But they were willing to give up their marriage for the gospel. Imagine that. And I always thought about that. And, but of course, my husband and I, we have a great relationship. We like each other besides love. We respect each other. And even though he just was not going to abide by tithes and offerings. So we didn't, but at home, I mean, there's nothing that I need or want, because he met the household responsibility above and beyond. So we were fine. But I was wise enough to team up with my husband and not create any situation. And I'm so happy I took that position. As a matter of fact, when he said, I am done with this. I don't want, I don't want to live my life this way anymore, because it was so constraining. It was so tight. It was so stifling. It was, based on the things that we wanted to do. And it's not that we did anything crazy. It's just that you want the freedom, you want the freedom to, to have a glass of wine. I remember, our pastors, he made such a big deal. One day, a whole freaking sermon about drinking and things like that. And I never drank. Except now I enjoy a glass of wine at meal and so forth. And not just that, but just the freedom to be yourself. Because when you are walking in your authentic self, you don't have to pretend, you don't have to perform, you don't have to think what to say, you don't have to think if it's pleasing to God, you don't have to think if it's pleasing to, the parishioners, you don't have to, worry about, your pastor walking in on you when you're in the middle of a steakhouse you don't have to think about that. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about complying, obeying, or any of that. You just live your authentic life. You love the people around you. You don't care who they love. If they're gay, lesbian, that's not a thing. You love everyone and you don't accept them. You embrace them. You embrace everyone. You have the freedom to embrace everyone. I mean, even politically, I remember that, there was such a political influence at church. That's why they should tax the churches. I think they should, churches are now becoming, they're becoming extinct. Because people are waking up. And, shows like mine that are telling you, you've got to know who you are and start authoring your own script, because your worth, your value, your words have value. Who is Ellen G. White? And why are you following Ellen G. White's dogma? Of course, she's dead, but to this day, why are you following that? You don't even know what it's all about. That's just her idea, just like everyone else, the Mormon church, the Baptist, the Episcopal, the Methodist, Presbyterian, all the Anglican church, all of those, that they were written and scripted by someone else, someone's idea of living. Someone created these tales, fable, myth, all of that, stories, and they scripted it in a book, and we follow it blindly. You have no idea, but what I discovered, my friend, is that life on the other side is a whole lot better. It's a whole lot lighter. It's a whole lot healthier, because mentally and emotionally and psychologically, there's a freedom that comes with that type of knowing who you are, of authenticity, living organically, not being afraid, not being afraid to die. When you're dead, you're dead. I keep saying that all the time. When you're dead, you're dead. You're not there. This whole idea of heaven, people really believe that. People believe that, when you die, you're either going to go to heaven or burn in hell. Really, think of that. And if I had to serve a God that created a hell for people that he created and with passions and desires and so forth, then that's not the God that I would serve at all. And if that God were to come, I would have a conversation with that God and say, what's the deal with you creating humans this way with passions, desires, feelings, so forth? And then you tell them they can't do this, they can't do that, and then creating a hell? Now, I'd rather go to hell. Of course, I don't believe in any of that. But just who came up with all of this? You've got to ask the question and not just take it for granted. But a belief system, again, belief is inherited. You have inherited belief. You don't choose belief, but because it's inherited, and we, repetition, creates a collaborative truth. What we decide is truth, because it's been repeated over and 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 over, then it really gets into your nervous system, and it shapes it shapes your identity. That is what you identify with, and that is all you know. For you to say, I don't know, it's a difficult thing. Like certain things that, I say, I simply don't know. I don't know. And if I don't know, I simply don't know. And I'm okay with that. What happens to you when you die? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. My mom passed away years ago. And I'm not going to see her again. She's dead. The memories, I relish the memories, because I had the opportunity to create some wonderful memories of her. As a matter of fact, my husband and I were, we were just relaxing the other day and talking about cruise we took together and things that I did for her, and, and made it up to New York and surprised her for her birthday, and took her to the 60th floor and had a surprise birthday party at an Italian restaurant, an intimate setting. And then one time I said to her, I said, Mom, grab a friend, get a friend, any friend. We're sending you to Freeport, Bahamas. And she chose a friend. We sent her. I called and I got the hotel and, and arranged for travel arrangements and so forth. And she went to Freeport, Bahamas. That felt so good. So those memories are wonderful, but that's it. She's gone. And I won't ever see her again. I know that, and I'm okay with that. But for people that believe, we're going to, until we meet again, when I see you again and whatever, that's hard to let go. And that, of course, is something that's comforting to your psychic. It's comforting. It's like a survival mechanism, because it helps you cope. It's a coping mechanism. It helps you cope with loss and grief and all of that, thinking that you're going to see that person again. But there is no proof. You have no proof, no verifiable proof, evidence, demonstrable proof of that. And these are things when you come into that place of maturity to accept certain things that you don't know, then life changes. I don't want to say it becomes easier, it becomes lighter because you don't carry that burden of what if. I have a friend and her mom lived in Asia, and she became ill. And this friend, who was a Christian, they were just because the mom had not accepted Christ as Lord and Savior. So they rushed, and one of them went over there, and then they did a Zoom with the pastor from here, and she said the sinner's prayer because it was imminent. She was gonna die, and they wanted to make sure that someone got there before she died so that she could. Can you imagine the angst they went through? Because they wanted, in their minds, if she didn't accept Jesus as Lord and Savior, that she would die and go to hell. And here she is, she's an older woman, I don't know, 90 something years old, and born and raised in Asia. Just imagine the agony that they went through, thinking that if she see, that is not living. And I know, because we went, there was a memorial, I don't know, there was just some kind of a meeting at the house, at the house, and they had videos and all that kind of stuff of what happened and so forth. But the whole idea was that they wanted to make sure that she said the sinner's prayer. It doesn't even make a lick of sense, because all they did was, the pastor was here and she was over there, and by Zoom and in her language, because the pastor here also spoke her language or dialect, and she said the sinner's prayer, and for them it brought them peace, because that bit of performance, that bit of compliance, obedience, of saying the sinner's prayer and so forth, that was accomplished with the mom. But do you see the agony that people go through just because of a belief system? Where did it all come from? Who created that? Who invented that? Somebody did. And if it's not you, let me tell you, my friend, you can author your own script. Once you get to know who you are, you can author your own script. How to live. I've authored my own script, and that's why I have the courage and the boldness to come and share this with you, because as a matter of fact, my husband, every time we, would talk about this and whatever, and he said, he says, I'm glad we need to author our own script on every situation, any given situation that may be new for us. He said, we need to author a script on this situation so that we can know how to navigate and live through whatever situation we're going through, because there are different phases, the different stages of life and so forth, different seasons, and you have to continue authoring your own script for whatever season it is that you are living in. Make sure you have your standards, your boundaries, and the things that you identify with, and where there's resonance and congruence, harmonize, so that you can be aligned with your truth. Because once you know the truth, that's what sets you free. I'm going to leave you with that, my friend, so that you can sup on that. Every Thursday, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, we meet right here. And if you can't meet me, then you can stream it on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube 24/7. In the meantime, I'm going to wish you a fantastic weekend. This weekend in my neck of the woods, it's kind of gooming over us, that it's going to be like a real icy situation. So everybody is preparing for that. So wherever you are, have a fantastic weekend. Do what you like to do best. And again, the whole idea is that you begin to live your life authentically. Talk to you. Well, we'll see you next week. If you need to touch base with me, it's you can drop me a note at info@the Cynthia Linox show.com, and I'll respond to you. So hasta la vista, amigos.